The following is a Shaw TV Public Affairs presentation. Constituency Report is produced as a public service by members of the BC Legislature through the facilities of Shaw TV.
Hello and welcome to Constituency Report. I'm Tracy Grimsrud. Joining me here in the studio today is Ian Paton. He is MLA for Delta South. Welcome, Ian. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you, Tracy.
Yeah, great to have you on the show. And let's take a look at your background. You're a longtime farmer in Delta?
Pretty much. Yeah, I was born, well, I guess I'll give away my age, 61 years ago on the farm that I'm living on still today. So It's pretty cool that I grew up on the farm. I'm living in my grandfather's and grandmother's house on the farm.
Yeah.
And my 90-year-old mom lives on the farm with us in another house like right next door across the driveway. So yeah, it's pretty cool to be still on the farm I was raised on.
Definitely. And that was dairy farming that your family
Dairy
was
farm, yeah. My grandfather was a dairy farmer. My dad followed in his footsteps, and I got back into dairy farming myself after a stint at UBC for 5 years, and decided in the long run I wanted to go back to the family farm.
Yeah, that's great. And that must be a great background for your role as the BC Liberals Agriculture Critic. How are you enjoying that role so far?
It's really good. I mean, it's sort of the one thing that I feel very comfortable with is agriculture. I've traveled different parts of North America and even the world to sort of study different modes of agriculture, how they're doing things in different parts of the world. My dad was chairman of the BC Agricultural Land Commission, so we know all about preserving farmland, and I'm very passionate about young people. You know, I was in 4-H as a kid. I'm still involved in 4-H even today as an adult, and 4-H is a program where young people can get involved with farming activities, and I want to see the next generation come along and not leave the farm. I want to see them, you know, making it profitable, giving them some different opportunities to add value, to think outside the box, and to carry on the family tradition of farming, rather than leaving to go take on another profession.
And it certainly seems like more and more young people do have that interest in where their food comes from and whatnot.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's great to see. Well, let's dive right into some of the big issues going on in your community, starting with one that you have been very vocal about, and that, of course, is the Massey Tunnel. We don't seem to be seeing much action on that front from the NDP, do we?
Certainly not. I was shocked that, you know, BC Liberals made an announcement back in, I think it was 2013, to really please the mayor of Delta that, hey, you're finally going to get your bridge, or you're going to get a replacement for the tunnel, put it that way. And then they launched, you know, almost 5 years of meetings and groups such as the farming community and you know, government officials and just everybody you could think of, the general public. There was meeting after meeting after meeting to go over all the different options, and there was basically 5 different options, and every time, even with the consulting reports from engineering firms, the options came up with, let's stay right on track with Highway 99. There's lots of room on the sides of it for expansion, for widening Highway 99, and if we go right over top of the tunnel with a bridge, we won't be disturbing much land or houses or businesses on either side, including farmland. So really, the bridge was the best option, and we were extremely disappointed when the budget came out in September with no signs of money to continue on this bridge project.
Yeah, and just further delay and study has been ordered, it seems. And there's been so much consultation, as you mentioned, 14,000 pages of information. Yeah. That delay must seem unacceptable to motorists. Tell us about the type of congestion and how unsafe this tunnel is.
Well, you know, even the city of Delta has put forward a letter to the province, to the government now, to undertake a safety audit of the tunnel and to work closely with our fire department, our police department, and the ambulance service to get firsthand information as to why the tunnel is unsafe even for our emergency responders. So it's unsafe in case of an earthquake, but it's very unsafe the fact that there's a fire, a huge car accident inside the tunnel. I mean, how can you even get in there? You can't get fire trucks or ambulances in there because it's jammed with cars.
Right.
There's nowhere to go by. So now our fire department have to go in on foot to try and tackle these fires or deal with people that are severely injured or hurt in an accident in the tunnel. There's toxic fumes inside the tunnel. So it really needs to be replaced. There's just a lot of reasons why we need to move forward with a new bridge.
Definitely. And you've taken the step of installing some giant billboards near the tunnel. What are you hoping that people will do when they see these?
Well, you know, I mean, in our caucus, they said, you know, we really should do something. We should really make a statement. And I put up my hand as a new guy and said, well, you know, I'm pretty handy with a sledgehammer and some wood and some carpentry. And I said, well, you know, why don't we throw up some signs that says, hey, folks, are you stuck in traffic? You know, maybe you should, you know, contact the NDP with a letter and say, hey, we want a new bridge. And so we went out with my son and a few buddies, and it was just good, clean fun on a Sunday afternoon. We put up these 3 signs, so you couldn't help but look at these 3 signs as you were sitting in traffic waiting to go through the tunnel, as usual, and people loved it. They just got such a kick out of it. They sent us letters and emails and all kinds of things. So it was a good bit of fun.
What about the issue of ride sharing? I know this has been another issue of debate. Any movement from the NDP on that issue?
Well, once again, Tracy, it's all about reviews. I almost said today in question period, I think we need to create a ministry of reviews because we're reviewing everything.
That's right.
You know, the government, the new government in power promised that they would bring ride sharing in by December 31st, and that's been put on hold. So now, don't ask me why, but they're going to review that. And you know, I have a son and daughter that are in their late 20s, and the young people that I know just can't believe. In fact, visitors that come here as tourists cannot believe that we don't have Lyft or Uber or some sort of ride sharing in our city. They go all over the world at cities, and they have apps for ride sharing, and you don't get that in British Columbia. They just can't believe it. They really can't believe it. So,
also on the transportation front, what's the state of public transit in South Delta? Any improvements needed there?
Well, I got a slight bit of good news. To be honest, and I'll sort of not quote, but the ideas behind our Mayor Lois Jackson is that south of the Fraser has been totally ignored really by TransLink. Sure, we have bus service, but it's not really good bus service. We don't have you know, SkyTrain or Rapid Transit, which I certainly want to see. People got to understand that I don't just want a bridge over the Fraser River with 10 lanes. I want a bridge that's going to be able to capably have a lane which is dedicated for rapid transit, for light rail. So that's very important to me, that we do have light rail that's one day going to go as far as the U.S. border, or it may go out to the Tsawwassen Ferry Terminal. So that's important to finally get us in South Delta in the picture as far as better transit. One thing that TransLink did try and cut out of for us was a bus route called the 602, which was a rapid route from Tsawwassen and Ladner straight over to the Bridgeport station. They wanted to take that out, but I will say that we had a very good meeting with TransLink in my office in Ladner about 2 months ago, and we pressed upon them that they just couldn't do this, and I'm happy to say that they've announced that they're going to keep the 602 running.
Oh,
So
fantastic.
that's pretty good news, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Another priority for you has to do with the dredging of secondary channels in Delta. What's the situation there?
Yeah, well, that's something that a lot of people don't understand. We have the main channel of the Fraser River, and it gets dredged on a regular basis by the federal port. And so there's a major dredging machine that goes up and down the middle of the river. However, there's all these little secondary channels that wind into places like Steveston, and several of them that wind into through Ladner and go to little areas like Captain's Cove Marina and Dee Slough and the Ladner Reach. And we have so many float homes, beautiful little cute float homes all through the Ladner area. We have recreational marinas, but we also have commercial. We have 2 big commercial fishing plants. One is called Lionsgate Fisheries, and the other one is called SM Products, which handles halibut. So it's very important that we're still able to get ships, fairly large ships, up these secondary channels. So the bottom line is that these secondary channels tend to fill in with sediment, become a real problem for our recreational boaters, a real problem for our commercial fishing vessels, a real problem for our float homes, because when the tide goes out on a very low tide, suddenly your float home isn't sitting level. It's sitting tipped on an angle because it's hung up on the sediment underneath it, which is dangerous to hydro lines coming into your float home, dangerous to gas lines that are coming into your float home. So I've worked with Delta City Council. We've been in Ottawa. And several years ago, we got funding, total funding from several groups of about $10 to $12 million for a major dredging project. But what we want to do now is try and keep up the dredging on an annual basis of not huge money, but at roughly $750,000, so that we can dredge a little bit every year instead of chasing down $12 million every 10 years. So yeah, very important that we stay on top of that.
Definitely. I understand there's also a water lot lease issue that you've been working on. Tell us a bit about that. Yeah,
wow, water lot leases. So in our particular part of the Fraser, down in Ladner and Tsawwassen and parts of Richmond, we have leases that are now taken over by the province. And so if you own a float home or you own a house that's partially on the dike, but part of it is on the water, is part of your property as well. So it's very confusing, and I can't get into all the details, but we don't have the ability for the province to give permanent water lot leases to people that are extended leases, such as 10 years or 20 years or 30 years. Right now, water lot leases are only being handed out for 2 years or 5 years. So we're trying to develop some really neat parts of Ladner Village, but we can't get developers to come in there because we want to create this little kind of Steveston-like zone in Ladner with cutesy restaurants and gift shops and different things. Well, if you're a Cactus Club or a Milestone, why would you want to come and spend a whole bunch of money to develop in Ladner on the waterfront when you only got a 2-year lease? And if you're a float home owner that's trying to sell your float home and a buyer comes along and goes, well, I'm going to go to my bank and get a mortgage, and the bank says, well, we're not going to lend you money to buy a float home that's only got a 2-year lease or a 5-year lease. So it's a big problem right now, and we're trying to get to the end of it, and we're trying to get answers from Flinro as to how we can speed up these water lot leases and get them extended to 30 or 40 years where a development company will come in and spend the money in Ladner Village.
Turning to some agricultural issues, I hear a priority for you is preserving the ability for farmers and ranchers to earn a secondary income on their farmland. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, you know, I have a bumper sticker on the back of my pickup truck, and it says it's not farmland without farmers. And so, you know, you can keep all the farmland you want, but if there's no farmers around to farm it, then what are you going to do with the farmland? That's where people start coming and go, well, let's use it for something else, you know. So I've always said this, if you're farming in Mexico or Arizona or California, you're probably farming for 12 months of the year. But up here in British Columbia with this climate, most of the farmers are sitting in the kitchen staring out the window at the rain and the snow for 7 months of the year. So how is that fair between Mexico, California, and Arizona to the guys farming up here? So I'm suggesting, like the Land Commission has given them the rules in Zone 2, that if you do have another business, suppose you're a young guy in Zone 2 way up north and you're really good at welding and fabricating. Well, why couldn't you set up a little shop on your farm to do welding and fabricating for your neighbors in the wintertime? Different things like that. Even if you've got barns on your farm where some of them are sitting empty in the wintertime. Why shouldn't you be able to store some motorhomes or boats or something for people? You know, there's all sorts of value-added things. A good example is Westham Island and Delta. We have something like 8 or 9 different value-added businesses on Westham Island now. It's almost like agritourism, where years ago you would grow strawberries or raspberries and you just ship them off to a processor and they all get mushed up and made for jam or whatever. Well, suddenly now people are building cutesy little shacks and they're going, well, let's sell strawberry ice cream and strawberry milkshakes and let's do U-Pick and let's bring in some donkeys and some goats for a petting zoo. And my goodness, on Westham Island, you can't even get a parking stall anymore in the summertime at some of these little farms out there. So it's a great way to make extra money rather than just shipping the product off to a processor. Even potatoes. I mean, they're making potato vodka now on farms.
Right.
You know, I've got some friends of mine in Delta, young guys, and this is very cool. They're growing organic barley on their farms in a big way. Like we're talking 200-300 acres. They're also growing hops on their farm. So guess what? They go, well, we're now allowed to have a brewery. So they're creating a craft brewery on their farm, which is going to be a great addition.
Absolutely.
In Delta. A craft brewery with homemade products going into the beer.
Yeah, sounds pretty straightforward to me.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, we're going to leave it there for a moment and take a short break here on Constituency Report. Grab a pen and paper. We'll put up contact information for MLA Ian Paton. Back to chat much more with him right after this. Welcome back to Constituency Report as we continue our chat today with Ian Paton, MLA for Delta South. Continuing with some agricultural issues, Ian. This summer, of course, BC saw quite a devastating wildfire season, and you toured areas like Cache Creek and Ashcroft with your colleague, MLA Jackie Taggart. And what's the situation for farmers and ranchers there?
Well, Tracy, you know, as we all know, it's certainly no surprise to anyone the amount of media coverage this summer of all the fires that took place throughout BC, probably one of the worst summers ever. And, you know, one of the biggest ones, the Elephant Hill fire, started in Ashcroft. And so as the agriculture critic, it gives me the opportunity to do some traveling throughout the province. And I thought it was important to you know, stop what I was doing even on my own farm this summer and head up to Ashcroft and Clinton and Cache Creek and Merritt and places like that and talk to farmers and ranchers that have been devastated by the fires up there. In fact, one of my first stops was a family that I know quite well that built an extremely high-tech dairy farm in Ashcroft. Probably about a $10 million operation with robotic milkers, the highest quality of feed and very expensive cattle. And when I got there, there was nothing there. It completely burnt to the ground. All his hydro towers had burnt. So this poor young guy had to spend about $200,000 of his own money just to put in new hydro poles to bring hydro from the main road back to his farm so he could get his irrigation pumps running again and different things like that. So a lot of implications from the fire. Pasture that's been burnt up that cattle would normally graze on, fencing that's burnt, so suddenly you got cattle that aren't enclosed, they're wandering off, who knows where they've gone. Yeah. And so the telltale is this time of year now where they're trying to round up cattle that who knows where they are or if they've gone missing. So there could be huge losses in livestock, losses in feed, losses in fencing, and all sorts of things like that. Even this dairy farmer, I mean, he had let's say $500,000 worth of feed stacked up in the yard that he'd grown for his cattle to feed them in the winter, and the fire got hold of that and burnt up all his feed. So yeah, quite devastating.
Absolutely. Yeah. We've got a photo to take a look at here. You're pictured with a group of people making a hay donation to wildfire victims. Tell us a bit about that.
Oh yeah, right. Well, I grow among other things, I grow hay on my own farm in Delta, and you know, I'm not a huge farmer anymore, but I suppose I grow about 5,000 bales of hay every summer, and I knew they were desperate for hay for horses and animals that the SPCA and whatnot had taken up in different parts of northern BC. So I donated 400 bales of my own hay and got it trucked up to, I think it went to Barrier, to a fairgrounds in Barrier where people had brought horses and whatnot to get them away from the fires. So I was happy to chip in that way by donating some hay from my own farm.
Yeah, absolutely. And how are these folks going to rebuild? Does the NDP have a recovery plan for them?
Well, that's a good question. I was back up in Merritt just a few weeks ago with my friend Jackie Taggart to talk to Kevin Boone from the BC Cattlemen's Association. So all the things I talked about are the things that we're going to be pressing very, very hard. I phoned just yesterday my friend with the dairy farm to find out, how things are going with compensation. And I just got his voicemail. So what we're waiting for, I don't really want to press them too hard because, there's a lot has to get done with a lot of people with filling out forms and figuring out what the losses are. But come January, February, we should be at the point where farmers and ranchers will be able to write down what their losses were for livestock, for fences, for feed, all those different things. And then we will be going hard at the government to make sure that all these farmers and ranchers were properly compensated.
Definitely. Well, as we speak, the legislative session will be wrapping up soon. And by the end of the year, the NDP will be making a big decision on the future of the Site C project. Yeah. What do projects like that and others around the province mean in terms of jobs and economic development?
Well, Tracy, I'm raised by a family that really believes in work, really believes in working. I can't ever remember ever not having a job. My parents insisted that, if you didn't have work, you went out and found it the next day. So I really believe in this whole province. It's too often we think of great areas like Victoria and Vancouver and Metro Vancouver as the hub of the province, but I think of everybody that is equal to all of us down here that live in little tiny towns like Houston, BC, or Pink Mountain, or Chetwynd, or Castlegar, or Grand Forks, or wherever it is in the province, or whether it's Ocean Falls, or Port Hardy, or Prince Rupert. Everybody deserves to make a good living in this province, and it's about having jobs. It's about making use of the resources that we have in our province that other countries in this world want, and they want to purchase from us, and that creates jobs for everybody in this province, and I think that's very important. So, we want to see good, clean electricity 100 years from now for our kids, and Site C Dam is going to provide that. When I was a young kid, my dad took me up to see the building of the WAC Bennett at one dam, and of course people were protesting that back in 1964 up the WC Bennett Dam. So, protesting dams and things like that is nothing new, but I really believe that we've got to think about the future. Clean electrical energy is, think about how many electric cars there's going to be 10 or 20 years from now.
Right.
It's very important that we do that. So, whether it's oil, whether it's natural gas, whether it's agriculture, fishing, forestry, Site C dams, we got to keep people working and give people good jobs to go to all over British Columbia.
Absolutely. You mentioned the future and youth and the importance of them having jobs, and you've really reached out to youth in the community. Tell us about the Delta South Youth Advisory Council.
Yeah, well, this was something very new for me. We had our first meeting about a week ago in my office of the Delta Youth Advisory Committee, and it was really good. We had several young people that are, basically aged, I think 14 to about 19 or so. And they came into the office, and kind of a nonpartisan thing. It's just like, hi, I'm your MLA, and let's discuss local issues. Let's discuss a bit about politics. And they got to ask me questions about what it's like to be an MLA and what it's like to sit in the legislature and what are all the different things that happen. And I really enjoy explaining it to them, and so it was good. And I think we're going to try and do this on a monthly basis, and hopefully we'll get a few more kids out next time.
That's great. Well, I know REACH does great work in the community with kids with special needs. Tell us about their new center. Very exciting.
Wow, I'm so excited. Out my way where I farm on 88th Street, and then just a couple of roads over from me is 72nd Street, and it's a very rural farm road, and that's where REACH has been for years, and some older buildings that were built in the 60s. And it's a tough place for parents to get to, with their kids. It's kind of out of the way. It's out in the farmland. There's not very good bus service out there, so collaboration with Delta, the Delta Ag Society, and several really good local corporations, we've managed to put together the money to build a brand new 3-story Reach building right in downtown Ladner at Memorial Park. So it's going to be so much more convenient, not only for employees, but for parents that are going to be able to drop their kids off there for Reach. And you know, I give so much credit to our CAO, George Harvey. He kind of convinced council. He says, hey, you know, we should really be thinking of millions to help out with this project, because we're all so lucky. We constantly vote yes for artificial turf fields and all the things that able-bodied kids can use, but we never think about the kids that don't get to use those things. I mean, we spend a lot of tax dollars on ice arenas and football fields and basketball courts, and some of these kids will never get to use that, you know? So it was like, wow, let's make sure we don't forget about kids that have autism and different disabilities like that. So Reach is very important.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Just a few minutes left in the show. Let's take a look at some of the great community events you've attended. You recently attended a fundraiser for the Little House Society. What do they do?
Little House Society is, that's an addiction society in South Delta. And I try to be as involved as I can because, as we all know, addiction, especially amongst our young people, is a big topic. The opioid crisis, so we have people that are counselors and people that can work with young people in Tawasin. So that's what the Little House for Addiction Services is.
You also attended local Remembrance Day ceremonies recently. Was the service well attended?
Really well attended. We have such a huge turnout in our community of Ladner. We all started the Legion, and we do a beautiful march down Delta Street with the pipe band and the police and the fire department and Coast Guard, and we end up at Memorial Park in Ladner for a really nice solemn ceremony. We go back to the Legion, and then I actually head out to the Tawasin Legion that afternoon for another get-together out there and a few speeches and whatnot. So it's a great day and very well attended in South Delta.
Well, the Delta Hospital Foundation also does great work, and they recently fundraised $455,000.
Yeah.
What sorts of things will those funds support?
Well, Tracy, yeah, I'm really proud of that. Kudos to my wife, Pam, who's actually the co-chair of the foundation gala. And this year we raised a record amount. I think we went from 300 and something thousand was the highest ever to $455,000 raised in one night at the gala. So that money goes towards all sorts of new diagnostic equipment. In fact, we've got a brand new diagnostic center being added onto the side of Delta Hospital. It's actually called the Peter C. Toigo Diagnostic Center, and all that money is going to go towards some fabulous new equipment for diagnosis.
I know you put your auctioneering skills to good use at that gala. A couple other events as well, the Chamber of Commerce Gala and Day at the Farm. Is that always fun for you?
It really is. I can't even imagine how many, I've been told probably millions of dollars I've raised over the years with my auctioneering skills. So as a professional auctioneer of farm equipment and livestock and whatnot, I get asked so many times over the years to do fundraiser auctions, not just in Delta, but all over Vancouver and Vancouver Island and whatever. So yeah, it's really fun, and it's kind of a fast-talking talent that I have, but I can raise a lot of money in a short period of time. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, we appreciate you chatting with us here today. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tracy. Thanks for having me.
Ian Paton, he is MLA for Delta South. His website, ianpatonmla.ca. Thanks so much for watching Constituency Report.